Timbaland vs. J Dilla, Who Sampled It Better by Navi D. Let's see who won.
Timbaland versus J Dilla, two of the most unique producers of our generation. Well, what happened when both flipped the exact same sample?
I mean, let's just be real. It's gonna be Dilla.
Well, today we're putting their beats side by side to see who came out on top. You're about to see a side of their genius that's never been shown before. So let's settle this once and for all and find out
what's the record?
Who sampled it better. In this video, we're going to break down how both of these producers made beats using the exact same sample, the different sampling techniques that they used, and even some ideas you can use for your own beats. Okay. So let's start off by looking at the sample itself.
You can see inside me.
This is a 70s soul sample that's been used hundreds, if not thousands of times by many producers like Q-Tip, J. Cole, and many more. But it's Timbaland and J Dilla's beats using this sample that jump out to me the most. Let me show you why. First, we'll look at Timbaland's beat when he used this sample for Aaliyah's Heartbroken.
Baby, 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 yeah. I wanna
Now this beat was made way back in 1996 at a time when Timbaland still sampled a lot, and his sampling approach during this time was really inventive.
Okay.
Like for example, purposely warping vinyl records to create new and unique sounds and textures. But unfortunately, Timbaland is also the victim of some of the biggest issues coming from sampling. After he went through multiple lawsuits over the years, he began to slowly move away from sampling. And it's a shame because a lot of his sampling techniques and his beats were just truly impressive, and this beat here is no different. Here we see him using one of his main sampling techniques that he often used. Let me show you what it is. This is the section of the sample.
I've personally gone viral in the past on the New Old Heads, shouts to Brother to the Night, for us discussing if Timbaland's beats have aged particularly well in hip-hop. And we were both of the opinion that they have not. In R&B, legend. But his hip-hop beats, that
Timbaland focuses on for his beat.
Yeah, I already know the Dilla beat is like good luck.
And as you can hear, it's the part of the sample that has no drums and minimal instrumentation, making it perfect for experimentation. Now the first thing I want to point out in this beat is Timbaland's drums.
It's not like Timbo drums.
I just find it impressive how clean and loud these drums are, and we even have some of that unusual Timbaland rhythm.
Especially for the time period.
Within this beat, another production technique that he was known for. But in terms of how the sample is used, he uses a resampling technique of playing one chop at multiple different pitches. Now this might seem simple, but it is incredibly difficult to do right. This technique requires a producer to find a single piece of a sample that not only sounds good, but also makes sense both musically and rhythmically when it's played at multiple different pitches and speeds. Basically, a lot of things need to go right for this technique to work, and that's exactly what Timbaland is able to pull off with this sample.
I would argue that yes, it is kind of difficult, but it's more so happenstance.
So Timbaland uses this piece of
trial and error.
The sample right here. And as you can see, this piece of the sample works perfectly when it's played both 4 and 9 semitones lower, which is exactly how Timbaland builds his core loop. Now again, to show you just how hard this is, let's say we took this different piece of the sample here and used it. What will happen? Well, this first chop actually sounds perfect, but if we listen to that second chop, the timing is off. So what if we tried changing the pitch of that second chop?
Maybe I'm a little biased. Again, I teach this stuff, right? And also, like, I'm somebody who specifically for the first 12 years that I made beats, I didn't use any time warping and beat matching at all. So time stretching. So this isn't like super challenging at all, but I guess, you know, different strokes.
Well, now, while the timing of the notes does sound a little bit better, musically speaking, it doesn't sound satisfying or like it works with the first chop now. It's so easy for this idea not to work because either the sounds don't play at the correct timing or musically they're just not making sense. So then from here, Timbaland...
And again, it's important to understand when the time period is as well. So that definitely is a factor in this as well.
And adds a simple bass line that follows the sample in the beat. And here I'm using Note Grabber, which lets me see all the notes in the sample. And as you can see, the root notes of Timbaland's loop are an F sharp and a C sharp. And that's exactly what Timbaland uses to build his bass line. Just a really cool beat, and this resampling technique was the core of many of Timbaland's beats from this era.
I think it's an okay beat, even for that era. Like, it's okay. But I think the one thing that Timbaland always did very well was he would, you know, it doesn't have to be the most intricate thing of all time, you know, like it can be simple, which this beat is kind of simple, but it also created this space for the vocalist to do what the vocalist needed to do on the beat. And that is another part of it that I think he kind of left out there, is that is important as well. You don't want to do too much. And so I think I would give Timbaland extra points for that particular thing.
But now let's take a look at J Dilla's beat using this exact same sample for Busta Rhymes 10 years later on You Can't Hold the Torch.
Hey, yeah, what happened to for the game, for the music?
Now what's interesting about J Dilla and this sample is that he actually used it multiple times throughout the year. For one, he used it on an old Slum Village remix.
You know what love is.
Yes, and I think another time too.
You know what love is. T3 is also not tip, y'all.
And other beats have been unearthed from beat tapes using the same sample too.
Different
and
chops.
while the beat he did for Busta might sound like a simple loop on the surface, the way this beat is put together is bizarre when you break it down. First, let me quickly show you the drums for this beat. As you may have noticed, there is something slightly unusual here.
There's no kick on the one. This drum pattern is already better than Timbaland's.
We don't have a kick on the one. And part of the
and it's also funky, man. I think that's the element that Dilla had that really kind of... Dilla was, you know, it's going to be like a Dilla glaze session, I guess. But like, again, shouts to Professor Sky. I just glaze good art. The one thing about Dilla that was so special was the fact that he was the pioneer of doing this in hip hop, as far as like not being on the grid, not being super quantized. It was super, super funky. And it just felt so organic, and it just felt like it was supposed to. And he spawned an entire generation of an entire generation to do the same thing. So
reason why is because this loop he builds using the sample doesn't start on the one either. Here are the chops that J Dilla uses. And as you can see, the looping point is nowhere near the normal downbeat. Just a very odd way to make a beat, but that's just the first layer of the sample that we're looking at here. There are actually multiple layers of the same sample being used. What Dilla does is he brings in a second layer of that high-pitched singing into the beat, but he does this in an unusual way too. Now here's how most producers would approach doing this. They would try cloning out the sample and copying and pasting the exact same chops from the first layer, and then simply just repitching this new...
That's only something that people started doing when they were trying to emulate Dilla. Nah, you just
layer up like so.
It's kind of the lazy way to do it, you know? You got to find another part in the song.
But as you heard, this also repitches the keys from within the sample, and the entire beat now just sounds pitched up. At this point, you could try using an EQ, but as you can hear, it's near impossible since those keys sit in a similar frequency as the singing. So what does J Dilla do? How does he solve this problem? This is where I am making an educated guess here, but he doesn't simply just copy and paste the same chops and pitch them up. Instead, he uses an entirely different part of the sample to do this.
Yes. Absolutely, and Dilla was known for doing this. I want to be very careful with the way that I use my words here, because I'm not going to say that like copying and duplicating it is necessarily lazy, but it's a different type of creative mindset to kind of understand, or maybe it's just understanding that, you know, you can use other elements of the song and layer them on top. Knowing when to do it, knowing how to do it does take a level of expertise and skill. But remember, it's in the same key, generally speaking, so you're going to be fine. So you just have to find a different place that doesn't already have drums. It doesn't have a lot of the movement that the original sample does. And he's got it right here with this.
As you can hear, this other section of the sample has keys playing at a much lower octave with that same singing on top though. And I believe this is what J Dilla does. He applies an EQ to this section. Since those keys are much lower and playing at a lower frequency, they are further away from the vocals, so separating them with an EQ is actually possible now.
He's been known to do stuff similar to this, like, you know the beat where it's like, you used to whip me with the strap when I was bad. It's like continuing the sample like out and out. Like it's not like the same type of technique, but it's like it comes from like the same frame of mind when you approach sampling of like you're molding the sample to your will, as opposed to like looking at it like there's like limitations. And I don't know really how to explain it, but he's done that a handful of times in a similar type of way.
But this singing only lasts a short amount of time before those brighter keys come in. So this is where he uses a boomeranging technique with these chops like so, where he's able to create an infinitely long layer of vocal singing by playing this chop back and forth.
Similar, yeah.
This basically allows Dilla to control the second layer of the sample.
There's a couple different ways that you can do that, but yeah.
And use it whenever he wants, helping bring more texture and make the beat feel less repetitive compared to it just being a simple loop. So these two legends have definitely shown a lot of sampling skills in their beats, but how about I make a beat using the same sample that can stand up to theirs? It's a tall order, one that I will probably...
Shouts to Nevedy for this video and the breakdown. It was definitely well thought out, and the fact that he reconstructed it that way. But to me, it's not even close. From like, I could like recreate what Timbaland did in 5 minutes. It would take me a little bit longer to do what Dilla did. And Dilla's has more funk, and it's just kind of what it is. Even though I will say the beat that Timbaland made works for what it does, and that's what he's always been good at.